surplus to requirements. Here it is, the actual book. And I should begin by saying this brilliant cover, etc., was designed by Bob Warwicker.
Is it Holy Island?
Yes. Yes, it's Holy Island. Yes, you're absolutely right. It is. Now, if like Jane Brooker, you've read the whole thing, you'll know how that comes into it. But if you're still only stuck at the beginning, John Campbell, then...
I've only read page 1, I admit it, yeah.
Then you're
John Campbell's ahead of me. John Campbell's ahead of me then. I've got the book.
Oh, yeah.
I haven't started it yet.
Oh, right. Well, you did only get the book yesterday, though, didn't you?
That's right. That's right.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, there you go. So that's allowed, I think. Some more people have come in. Thank you, people, for coming. I did say just now that I know some of you can't stay very long because you have another meeting to go to or some other exciting event. Please don't worry about that. If you have to leave or feed the cat or something else, then we quite understand. Thank you. Thank you for coming to this Zoom about surplus to requirements. If you've got a question you want to ask, please put it in the chat and we'll try to get round to some of them. We need to do a few thank yous right at the beginning, because there's no doubt that if you write a book, a lot of people help you. You can't do it on your own. And I already mentioned Bob, who obviously is my right-hand man. He sitteth at the right hand of the Janet Leighs and has done wonders with the whole thing. But in addition to all of that, as you, if you've read the acknowledgements, there are lots of other people who helped. And by the way, we've now got 20 people here. So that's very kind of you. And some of those people are here tonight. Some people read the proofs and tried to make sense of my errors. Some people were at it before the proofs and tried to make sense of my nonsense. And some people are still, I'm sure, waiting for theirs to drop through their letterbox. But it's time now to say surplus to requirements, the roadshow. Here it is. We're going to read you a few bits out of surplus to requirements. The thing is that if you've not read it yet, we don't want it to be too many spoilers. So we're only reading a very small couple of paragraphs, okay? Someone just asked about the cover, and yes, it's true, that is a picture of the causeway to Holy Island. We have been there, and you might have realized that there's a lot of walking in the book. But it's not the sort of nice, cozy, gentle walking that was in Come Wind, Come Weather. Okay, it's all a bit more gritty. It's all a bit more gritty in surplus. And it goes to some different places, because Holy Island, for example, is off the northeast coast of England, in case you're not sure. But when you read the book, you'll realize why it goes there. It says at the beginning of the book a couple of things I should alert you to. First off, it says a word from the author. And that says there are some scenes of violence and use of strong language in this book. I put it there because I didn't want anyone to be shocked or overturned by encountering that in the course of the story, particularly as the next thing it says on the next page is welcome everyone like Christ from the Rule of St. Benedict, 516 AD. We could have a discussion another day about whether those two things are compatible. but as a member of the lay community of St. Benedict, for which I thank many, many members for their support and for coming here tonight, I'd just like to say that the era in which the rule of St. Benedict was written was, of course, a turbulent one after the fall of the Roman Empire. And it has also been a document that has been used by people in all sorts of circumstances, including challenging times, around the world ever since. So I don't personally think the two things are incompatible, but I do just warn you, if you're not expecting that, having read that lovely book, Calm Wind, Calm Weather, in which Lees battles torrential weather up and down the length and breadth of Britain, you might not be expecting it, that's all. Okay, I'm going to start at the beginning. A city in the north of England, November 2050 AD. Already this gives you some clues about the book. First of all, you can play the game of trying to determine the locations of the book, if you like. And if you think you can work those out, you might want to tell us later. I'll say it again. A city in the north of England, November 2050 AD. Urgent. 30th of November 2050. This automated message is to tell you that you will soon be surplus to population requirements under the Required to Die Act 2041. On the 29th of November 2051, your allocated pension will cease. On or before that date, you must make provision to die. Read this carefully and comply. You have 5 days to reply. When you write a book of fiction, and this is my first attempt at writing a novel, they say you have to have a strong hook. The hook is the thing that pulls your readers into the book. And I hope that the notice that the main character in the book, who is called the Olden, by the way, has got her pop, notice that she's required to die under the Required to Die Act 2041, is a strong enough hook to cause you to leap into the book and want to know more. So tell me, if you've read the first page, or even if you haven't, what do you think of the hook? You can unmute yourself and tell me that, except perhaps Rosie, who might send us all going bonkers again. But you could tell us in a chat message if like. What do you think of the hook? Who's got a comment about
It's very
the hook?
hooky.
It's very hooky, is it, John? In what way?
Well, it grabs you. It does.
Oh, good.
I mean, it actually scared me and said, no, I'm not quite ready to read this yet.
Bless you.
But I'm going to have to go back and do it.
Right. Well, thank you for persevering with it. I do appreciate that. Any more comments on the hook?
Well, when you sold the film rights, Janet, that will make an absolutely shocking opening scene of the movie.
Yes. And who will play the old one in the movie? Now, some people have already had some ideas about that.
You, Janet.
Janet,
You. On.
Janet, can I have first dibs of adapting the screenplay, please?
Yes, that's Tim. He wants to do the screenplay. Very
Yeah.
good, Tim. That's fine. Lovely. Will it be a Netflix series?
Because I think having that main heroine being like this, the olden, somebody of an old generation, it's
Yeah.
just you've not seen that before. I mean, in all sorts of dystopias that we've seen before, you never have an old person in the center of a dystopian, science fiction story, and I think that is the hook.
Thank you.
Even more so than the pop thing is a great hook, but also the hook is the character, isn't it?
Yes.
Point of order, Peter Ustinov in Logan's Run.
Is he in Logan's Run, Peter Ustinov?
Yeah, he's the old guy that they can't believe how old he is at the end.
Yeah.
Oh, they
Oh,
can't.
that's right.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You
Is he
do
the
get-
main character? Or is
No.
Logan the main character?
No, Logan is, and it tends to be in the dystopian dystopian movies that it is primarily action by the younger. You do get older people, but they're kind of a supporting role on the periphery rather than being the main character that
It was
you are
just a
following.
joke.
Oh, was it? Oh, that's all right, Tony. We're all rolling about
Sorry.
here. Don't worry. Oh, you've gone, Tony. Don't do that. Come back.
I think it should be played by Sheila Hancock because
That was
she's only
Jane's idea.
92.
Yeah.
Jane in France, BFF. She is saying Sheila Hancock gets her vote
Yeah.
for the old one.
Alison Steadman.
Alison
Oh,
Stead-
not bad, not bad. Yeah.
I always
Bit more
said
punk.
that the person who would play me in a movie about my life would be Beryl Streep. She's Meryl's sister. Right. So
I thought
I'm
you were going to say Beryl Reid. A bit late for that.
very good. Yeah. Right. So any more comments about the beginning then before we move on to halfway through?
Sorry, I arrived late. So I
Oh,
missed
that's all
the
right, Chris.
introduction. Yeah,
It's good to see you here.
I think it's very topical, isn't it? I mean, with this bill going through Parliament, I think
Yes.
we're all being faced with it.
Well, that's one of the reasons why I decided in the end to publish it myself, because unfortunately the fiction publishing industry does take a very long time to grind its way along.
So,
And anyway, who's to say it would ever happen?
so did you pay the MP to put this bill in through Parliament?
No, I'm afraid I
for your book?
didn't. I have no confidence in her at all, I'm afraid. It's going through the committee stage at the moment. You might want to stay in touch with that just to find out what mess they're making of it. Yeah, so that I actually had the idea quite a long time ago, as you probably know. I mean, it goes back to 2015-16 or so when I first got the idea to start writing. And there wasn't a bill like this on the cards then. There was just the general sense that social attitudes were moving this way. Jane, you've said yourself in France too, there's been a move towards this notion that we should have the right to die. And as you can see from the book, if you've read any of it, that my main concern about that is the right to life. And especially for those who don't have the choice, can't communicate the choice, face coercion, being ignored, etc. And it's not as if this hasn't happened before, is it? Exactly. So it was my experience as a speech therapist that really led me to put the character of Hope, for example, the non-verbal child who's the sign language user, into the book. Because obviously in my work as a speech therapist, I knew lots of children and young people for whom the opportunity to use verbal language would never come their way. So that was the beginning of the book. Let's go to the middle of the book and ask Hannah Warwicker to step up to the plate, please.
Unmute.
Oh, you need to unmute yourself, Hannah Warwicker.
I have unmuted.
How are you?
I am well, thank you.
Good.
I'm excited that this has come to fruition.
Oh, thank you.
At last. It feels like my entire childhood and youth in a dystopian book about 2050 something. Do you know what I mean? So there we go.
She is good, isn't she? It is your entire childhood and youth. That's why it says in the acknowledgements that you lived most of it.
Indeed.
What do you remember about Hadrian's Wall?
Surprisingly little for a classics teacher. But what I actually remember, I think more than when I went there with you as a very small child, is that since then they've been doing some sort of rebuilding and reenacting and experimental archaeology up there. So you can kind of, live out your dreams of being a Roman soldier, and you don't even have to be a small child to do that. They've had community reenactment groups doing a lot of that. And that was what was in my mind as I was reading this extract in advance of tonight, actually. Was that aspect of the ongoing life of Hadrian's Wall.
Well, that's right. Don't you think it's amazing that it was built in 120 AD and it's still there?
Indeed. And pretty intact, actually, for a thing that was, abandoned on the northern frontier of the Roman Empire. Or a
Exactly.
northern frontier of the Roman Empire.
It is, of course, a UNESCO World Heritage Site, ladies and gentlemen.
As is the place I'm currently standing. Well,
indeed.
All things, alike. Yep. Right. There we go.
You're going to read a very small bit from the middle chapter, which is chapter 7.
I'm reading about Housted's Fort. We reach another of the larger Roman remnants that punctuate the length of the wall, heaps of stone and uneven grass, making a maze between us and the horizon. Hope, with her ragged gait, picks her way over the ground beside me, leaning on me. I'm her legs, and she's my eyes. Braga has told us to go on slowly, saying there's a place there where we can wash. Such a rare idea. We decide to try it, while she goes back down for supplies. One of those information panels they put up around museum sites is sticking up in the grass. Standing looking at it, we are like rare tourists rather than fugitives. It begins, infanticide, a civilized response. I stop reading. I don't want Hope to see it, and I tug her arm to get her to come away. I'm an educated woman. I know stuff. The Romans practiced infanticide of deformed infants by leaving them exposed in isolated places. I also know they later changed their minds, and by 374 AD it was outlawed. We brought it back as a sign we were also civilized. It's no longer a criminal offence to murder disabled children. I pull Hope down beside me, behind a low wall.
That's the wall then, and that's all this AD stuff. What do you make of that?
I wanted also to observe that they've recently discovered that they think the Romans were practicing not just exposure, so not just abandonment in Roman Britain, but sometimes active neonatal infanticide.
Oh, right.
Recent research shows that particularly further away from Rome, that seems to have been deliberately done, not just, the old narrative was, oh, well, they, couldn't actually kill them themselves, but they did routinely leave them to die.
Yeah.
But recent research suggests that sometimes they were actually actively practicing infanticide.
Oh, right. Oh, thanks for that, Hannah. I didn't know that. Thank you.
They didn't do it just of disabled children, because there's Chedworth Villa in Oxfordshire. They found skulls of lots of babies, and they killed the babies of slaves.
Oh, right. Oh, thanks for that. Who was that? Just told us that.
Bringing them up. So, they found quite a lot of babies' bodies that clearly had been, surplus to requirements, basically.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, thanks, Jane. That's a helpful piece of information. I didn't know that. A few other people had to go. Thanks for coming, people that had to go. Yeah, so that was in or at least up to about 350 AD. What do you make of this AD business? Do you go on about AD much?
Only when I'm doing my history stuff.
Anyone going to take that one up? When I first, in the process of writing the book, you have to get a sort of developmental editor, right, who helps you to sort of hone the book into a story and take out some of the more irrelevant bits and one thing and another. But for me, you see, the AD is quite an important bit. We don't use it now, do we? We don't go around saying it's 25 AD, do we? But it is, isn't it? And these are some of the clues that the book's not just about old people or disabled ones. It's about something to do with the way of the cross and the crosswise one. And that we're using that dating system on purpose to remind us that that's where it came from.
In quite a lot of various papers that are around, research papers, BC and AD, or particularly AD, has become a lot less used and is placed differently.
Yes.
And I think it's interesting, and it also includes theological papers within colleges and universities, and that's interesting. And theological journals also may include that. So I think there isn't always policy on that. But I I'm interested in why that is, and why institutions now are more, European institutions are more moved towards that, and what that does for their roots, and who is remembered and therefore who is excluded out of that. And it makes me think about a book I read recently called The Department by John Pring, that is a different account of people currently surplus to requirements relating to the DWP in the UK and things around that. So it just made me think about time. AD prompts me to think about the time then, the time now, the time then in the past, and different approaches to time that I think are very helpful, different approaches, a range of them.
Yes, thanks, Kate. That's why it's there, really. It's about that, different approaches to time and where we've gone with those and where they've come from. How did the story of the Crosswise One come into the country? Was it down to where Miss Warwicker was just telling us she's hanging out down there in Canterbury, in 597 AD? Was it she's not in 597 AD? It's not a time traveling Zoom, this. Okay, I just want to reassure those people who
Sometimes I think I am in 597 AD.
Right, sorry. Well, I don't think you are you? But yeah, so how did the story of the Crosswise One get into the country, and what happened to it in the landscape, and where are the signs as to where it's gone? When I was walking the end to end, I was very aware of this, how faith kept springing up in the landscape in lots of different ways, and of course different expressions of faith as well. So there had to be some of that for the Olden to encounter that, because one of the things that's quite difficult with the right to die idea is that, of course, the group of people that you can most obviously dismiss as having a valid opinion on the subject are the Christians, because they have ceased to count, really, in terms of social influence. You know, we don't have really any Christian social influencers. To be a social influencer, you've got to have your bottom injected with some fluid, and you've got to do other things of that sort. I was trying to think of another example there, as you could tell. If you can think of one, put it in the chat. So the obvious group of people you can dismiss are the people who follow the Crosswise One, and they make it easier for you because, as you know, they sort of flip-flop about themselves. It's estimated that about 60% of members of the Church of England now support the right to die, for example. So yeah, the whole AD thing is part of that, and you'll see in the back of the book a list as well of the other named characters in the book and how they fit in with the whole AD timeline and stuff. I think we better go on and answer some of these questions before Bob takes us to the end of the book. What were the questions? Here is
what brought you challenge and joy in writing it?
Oh, someone has asked a question. What brought me
Kate.
challenge? Oh, it was Kate. Brought me challenge and joy in writing it. Well, I decided to write it as my sort of next invention of myself as a writer, as I'd not written a novel before, so that it was a huge challenge. There's no doubt about that. What brought me joy in doing it was bringing together loads and loads of stories and ideas that I'd had sort of collected over the years and finding ways of putting them together. A lot of the incidents in the book do have their origins in things that people and places and things, although it's fiction, they were sparked off by things like that. So, for example, there is actually a yellow bookshop in Glossop, Now, I don't know whether it has books in the window called Do It Yourself: Irrigation, Taxidermy for Beginners, or whatever the other one is. But I wouldn't be at all surprised, because Glossop is that sort of place.
You see it all the time.
Yeah, you see it all the time there, as you say. So it was great to be able to do that, to bring those lots of stories together and places together and so forth. And it's great to have the chance to use your imagination in that way, you know, to weave a story like this together. There's 95,000 words altogether. It astonishes me. It really, really, really astonishes me. Does that answer your question, Kate, or have you some follow-up you wish to? Oh, it does. Goody. Has anyone else got a question? Because so far that was Kate's question and no one else had one. Come on now. Bob's going to read us a bit. Bob, you're going to read us a bit.
I think this doesn't constitute a
spoiler. No,
a spoiler. It's not part of the plot, really.
No, it's not part of the plot, but it is further along in the book, isn't it?
And it's something out of your family history, isn't it, Janet?
It is.
Apart from us, the only thing to survive the fish shed is the box of kippers. There's a small hob in the galley, and I begin to heat them up one at a time, making them softer for Hope to chew once I have taken the bones out. Kippers, a flavour from my childhood. There's nothing like it. The nostalgic memory of standing guard at the door of the smoking shed, timing how long the kippers would be in there, nudges at me as I cook them in the galley on the wobbly boat.
Yes, I come from a family of fish sellers in North London. Well, some of you have accompanied me on parts of that journey before, haven't you, John? He's not listening. He's dozed off down there. Oi, London, wake up there. We've been down the West Green Road before, haven't we?
I have. I was just going to say, was there a smokehouse to do the kippers in Tottenham?
Yeah, we had our own smokehouse, my family.
Oh, I hadn't realised that.
Yeah, it was brilliant.
There's a hipster one in Manchester now.
Yeah, there's a hipster one in Manchester, James and Fiona. Did you know that?
Near Stevenson Square somewhere.
Does the hipster one also sort of do you a sort of special beard rate, Bob? So you can have kippers and have your beard trimmed.
Oh, wow. What more could anybody want?
I don't get the connection between kippers and beards, but there we are.
And as a man with a beard, you want to, I can imagine. You need to know whether you've missed out on something vital there.
It's a barbel, some bit of anyway.
Meanwhile, back in the fish smokehouse in West Green Road, the first job you got in the family, when you were sort of old enough to kind of be able to take part, was to time how long the fish was in the smokehouse for, because there was a big clock on the wall, and you know, even as early as you could tell the time, you were allowed to be part of the process by noting what time the fish went in and therefore what time it was due to come out. And then it was lovely. I mean, the fish of my childhood is a substance for which I regularly pine, and it explains a lot of the fish and chips in the first book. I'm referring, of course, now back to Come Wind, Come Weather. You will remember there's a lot of fish and chips in this book, and some people wonder why. And it is entirely because I grew up in a fish shop. So, yes, that's the fish shop in Surplus to Requirements. Indeed, I would suggest that these are companion volumes.
They are.
In lots of ways, aren't they? Who agreed with that just now? Oh, Jane, she's read them both. You've read them both, Jane?
I'd say they are, actually.
It's just this one's a sort of bit grittier.
That one, I mean, Come Wind, Come Weather was lovely, and it was a very gentle way of doing pilgrimage. And I mean, I think I said when I did the review for you on the magazine that, you know, you could use it almost every day without actually physically going on the pilgrimage. And for someone like me who now, I would find it very difficult to go on a pilgrimage at the moment, it's lovely because I can do it in a kind of metaphorical way, I guess. The other one is far more gritty. I have to say, I found some of your concepts quite challenging because to some extent, I'm not averse to the right to die. I can see the dangers in it and I appreciate those and I accept them, but I'm not averse to it. The thought that maybe a time would come when I would think I would like to just finish off. I've got some awful thing and I just want to finish it off. And the fact that, that becomes very difficult. And if I wanted to go abroad to do it, I know that people can't go with me because coming back, they'll be prosecuted for assisting a suicide. And that morally is quite a challenge, isn't it?
It is, Jane. Yeah, it is. Yeah.
It's a difficult, Willow go, difficult thing. But I found the book, well, as I say, I just couldn't put it down. I found it immensely enjoyable.
Thank you. And I recognise that there's probably a huge range of views about the right to die just gathered in the 20 people we've got here tonight. And I thank all of you for coming along and talking about the book and listening to other people's points of view about the book. It's not just, or not only about that, of course. Some other people might have some comments or questions.
I like the interaction actually very much, which sometimes I think a lot of people do miss out on, the interaction between the different age groups.
Thank you, Jane.
And that the children who aren't now being educated and almost and sometimes abandoned and trying to bring up children, you're on the edge of survival in your book. The fact that the Alden is so generous, not in just her time and her storytelling, but in sharing out the meager resources that she's got. I found that, the compassion that's there in such a harsh world is, I found that quite moving.
Oh, thank you.
One of the things what I found moving about it, I think, was the meeting and the parting and then meeting up again. And the way that when people are on a journey, they sometimes cross paths and then part, and then you meet up with your old friends again.
Yes.
And you catch up, and especially in those kind of circumstances.
Yeah, I'm very aware that I'm very, very blessed in that way myself. The number of people who come along with me on this journey, both literally and, in memory and so forth, people I speak to quite regularly, people I take walks with, people who, I meet online, people I don't see for ages, months, years, and then I see them several times in close sequence again, and so on. I'm very, very aware of that. You're all terribly generous to me in that regard, and it is an important part of the whole business of community for me. The reason I said the book was about the rule of St. Benedict was because I do believe it is about community building. It is about community growing, and it's also about the community resilience, and about, of course, what can undermine community. I'd just like to go quickly to Paris now. It's an international meeting, this, and ask Jane Strands why she's got her hand up.
Well, I'll put it down again now. But actually, one of the things I was really thinking about listening to the reactions tonight, but also beginning to sort of, for me, it's really interesting to reread it in its completed version. I just think that's so amazing. And I've still got sort of the old version in me as well. It's quite interesting. But, I think I've left some comments about sort of the acceptable year of the Lord and all of these things. But I think the thing that comes across to me tonight, as we sort of open the book, at the time that we open the book, 2 weeks into Trump's presidency, and with Nigel Farage all over radio and TV in the UK, with whatever's happening in Germany at the moment and whatever is maybe happening here in France as well. Who is telling the compelling story for community today? And it terrifies me that the only compelling story for community that is being told, you know, the person who seems to be sharing a hopeful story is Farage, and our failure on the compassionate side of politics to have fun about telling desperate stories, yeah, and to enjoy it. And the book speaks about the enduring power of story. And I mean, we talked about the violent parts of it in the earlier parts of in the earlier gestations of the book. And I also found some of those very disturbing. And I'm looking forward to getting to that bit again. But we need to be able to share story that in a way that's not po-faced. And I think that's what's great about the way you're doing this, Janet. Because I'm a very po-faced sort of person, and I think that that's one of the reasons that the really brilliant things that we're doing in compassionate politics and in what Kate's doing with the Dandelion community and things, these are all fucking good fun. Sorry, I've now sworn on your video. You'll have to chop that out. But I mean, you know, we're having a great time in these compassionate politics places. We're really having a good time, and we're living together with people who don't agree with us, and we're having a good time. But how do we find the energy, the creativity, and the sheer pizzazz to do it in a fun way, and not, you know, to rock against racism, to go on the Red Wedge tour? I mean, that's all part of my dim and distant youth from 40 years ago. But we've got to find a fun way to do this. You know,
we have,
and that's
Jane.
one of the brilliant things about the book.
Thank you. Because that was one of the things that was driving me a lot of the time, having come to 2020, the COVID pandemic and so forth. At that point, if you remember, I was surplus to requirements, but of course, due to the current way the state pension scheme is run, I was not any longer entitled to my state pension for another 6 years. And I was therefore termed by, I believe, the Chancellor of the Exchequer at the time, economically inactive. And, you know, the amount of money I gained in my pension was from my very small NHS pension at the time. And I knew that there were a lot of other WASPy women who were a hell of a lot worse off than me, and who were also, you know, not as fit as me, in so many ways. I mean, WASPy women were dying before they ever got their pensions, at quite a rate. And so a lot of these things were fueling, as you know, I'm a very angry woman in lots of ways. And the sense of being now, I was no longer in active ministry in the paid sense of the word. I had to find some way of putting the stuff together that said this is damaging, this is undermining community, this is something that I can't see a positive outcome for the kind of behavior that puts people down, puts their lives on the line, and doesn't take account of the most vulnerable people I know. And I had to find ways of doing that. And that was essentially what fueled it. Of course, why did I choose this particular format? Well, you can imagine that dystopia has always been something that's fascinated me. I was 16 when I first read 1984 for my O-level, then it was in those days. Hannah it was that has just disappeared down there in 597 AD again, who introduced me to the Hunger Games, for example. You might remember that, Hannah. Yeah. And you know, the Handmaid's Tale and all of these other amazing dystopias that I've often turned to, and I just think that it was a natural fit, really. And I was so thrilled on Saturday morning of this weekend to find that Surplus to Requirements had risen to number 719 in the dystopia list on the Amazon website. Now, did you even know there was a dystopia list? Now, did you even know that I started off at 4,000 and something? And there I was on Saturday morning. I was at 719 on the dystopia list on the Amazon website. And it felt like the classic FM Hall of Fame, but without the music.
I hate to burst your bubble, Janet. I hate to burst your bubble, but I think, you know, my daughter's an author and she's got about 18 books published, and I've said about getting on the list, and actually a lot of the people who hit the top of the list, they've paid a lot of money to be put there, to get the review, getting put in there. So I don't want to burst your bubble.
I don't think they paid to get to 719 though, did they?
No.
So I think
doing
that
well.
was probably genuine. I think I probably genuinely was at number 719.
Yeah,
I
I
haven't
think you
paid
are.
anyone
Better
anything.
than it sounds then in that case.
Yes, you haven't paid. You're genuine article.
Yeah, those were genuinely paid. Of course, whether they'll all read it or not is another question. But thank you, all of you, for doing what you're doing. It's now 7:45, and we've been doing this for 45 minutes. Oh, for goodness sake. We've only had one person post a question. We need some more.
Another one.
Sorry?
Just thinking about the acceptable year of the Lord from Isaiah, the promise of liberation from exile in Babylon, and also in Jesus's sermon in Luke. So when does AD become AD?
Ah, that's what did Jane ask that just now?
No, it's JA.
It was me, yeah.
Oh, too many Janes.
Yeah, too many Janes.
Yeah. Yeah, well, all good questions. The one thing one caveat I'd put in the whole thing is, I do say this in the acknowledgements, any errors that you might find there are entirely mine. I have read lots of sources, it's true. My biggest source is obviously the Bible. And as you know, I always walk with the remembered Bible in me. So any biblical interpretation that you think amiss, or down to Lee's making it up, that's probably true. By the way, all biblical interpreters make things up. Okay, even those ones that have got really posh names and have got loads of books and all the rest of it. Biblical interpretation is about making things up, all right? That's the whole point of it. So if the Bible, Bede's Ecclesiastical History of the English People, that was written in 700 and something AD, and of course Julian of Norwich, Revelations of Divine Love, a book from the 14th century. So I do say that those are just three of them, but you know, I do say that there were a lot of sources, and I accept that I interpret and retell them in you know, that's down to me how I do that. So that business about where it all starts and begins, yeah, I take your point. What I want to do is provoke people into discussing for themselves, you know, what does it mean? Do we still live in that era, or do we live in some other era? And if we live in some other era, what are the implications of that then? And what era will we live in 2050 AD? Because when I first started writing the book, I set it in 2020. And then one of the people who was helping me with the development of the book said, it's not far enough ahead. It's got to be a bit further than that, right? And so we pushed it on to 2050. But of course, actually, most of it's already happening. Jane, you've got your hand up again.
I know. Well, you've got some more questions. One is about the ending and whether there's going to be a sequel. That's one question. And then I've just been sort of thinking about dystopia and thinking that really what we're living in at the moment is dystopia. And so it's, I mean, I was just reading a report from what's happening to women and children in Goma this evening.
Yeah.
And it just sort of echoed with what I have not yet read, but the previous version of what I've read of a passage in Surplus.
Yeah.
And thinking, yeah, well, this is real.
Yeah.
And then thinking about your thing just now about interpretation.
Yeah.
You know that the Jewish prayer for the dead is called saying Kaddish, yeah.
Yeah.
And then the Jewish word for interpretation and for sort of wrapping on interpretation of the scriptures is midrash. And I think that's in lots of ways what surplus is. It's both midrash and Kaddish for everything that's died, for society that's died as well,
Yes.
and for things that are coming up again and coming through. So there you are. There's some questions from your not yet readers who want to know whether there's going to be a sequel.
Well, that's a good question, because I've no idea. I have sort of got several half-started bits that could become part of a sequel. It's a bit difficult to decide whether to set the sequel immediately after this version, to leave 5, 6, 10 years, to leave 30 years. It's quite difficult. Should the old one have died before the sequel comes on? Bob's just patted me on the back.
Well, we don't know what's happened at the end of the book yet.
Ah, we don't know what's happened at the end of the book yet. Good, quite. Anyway, what I'm saying is I don't know. But I am aware that it took me 8 years to write this, so don't expect a sequel anytime soon. Okay? Could be a while, right? It's quite difficult because I do think that it seems obvious to me that if there is a next part of the story, it's about the business of community building and growing on community from where it comes to in the story so far. Do you see what I mean? Yeah, that's quite difficult. But there are loads of members of the lay community of St. Benedict here who have loads of ideas about growing community, won't they? And what I should put in next. Do you think? I'll give you a moment to think about that while I read you something out of the book. This is near the end, but it's also near the beginning, if you see what I mean. Because if you were to read the Gospel of Matthew, you'd probably find a version of this there. In the book, there's lots of bits of the Remembered Bible, and I use the Remembered Bible every day, as you know. And this is a key bit of the Remembered Bible for me. And in fact, when I was working as a school chaplain, it was one of the things I used to encourage the young people to explore the most often. And us insiders in the church often call it the Beatitudes, right? So here then is a version of the Beatitudes on page 297 of the book. Blessed are those who make peace. They are God's children. Blessed are the pure of heart. They are gateways into God's love. Blessed are the humble ones. God will surely lift them up. Blessed are the merciful. They will know what mercy is. Blessed are those who mourn. They will be comforted. Blessed are the hunted ones. God's kingdom is ever theirs. Blessed are those who break the silence of injustice. Surely God's voice shall be heard through them. So you've got to trek the whole way from the north of England to the Western Isles, and you've got the Remembered Bible to take with you. What is going to be your key part of the Remembered Bible? Come now. Ideas, please.
Janet, I came to this meeting having not read the book and thinking.
Don't worry, Chris.
If I've come to the meeting, I'd probably be encouraged to read the book, and you certainly encouraged me to read the book. And
that's kind.
As you know, I've been in the lay community for a long time, and
yeah.
I'm also a Catholic. So the Pope Francis has made this a year of Jubilee,
yes,
with the theme of Pilgrims of Hope. I certainly think we need to have Pilgrims of Hope at this time. And I think your book has come out at a very relevant time. And you've certainly got me thinking to buy it and read it. And then I'll come back to you with my thoughts about how it relates to community building.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you. Well, you're a former leader of the lay community, so I'll be looking forward to that. And of course, it's not an accident that one of the main subsidiary characters in the book is called Hope. the child in the book who goes with the Olden is called Hope,
Yeah.
and that isn't an accident.
No.
No.
I think we need it, don't we? And
Yeah.
yeah. So it's an exciting time for us.
Yeah.
But there are real challenges.
Yeah,
But
absolutely. Yeah.
we have got the resources within ourselves through the Holy Spirit to help us to move forward.
Thank you, Chris. Yeah,
Now, I
thanks.
think, I think we do need to take risks. We don't know always where we're going to end up, but we need to see where the Spirit takes us and move forward. So thank you very much for taking all the trouble to write the book. And we'll enjoy
My pleasure. My pleasure. Thank you for your comments. I know there's one or two people haven't said anything yet, and I don't want to go before you. There's 5 minutes to 8 o'clock. 5 minutes now. If you've got something you want to burningly say about surplus to requirements, please, it's your moment. It's your moment.
I was just going to say, like, I'm not particularly well read with the Bible, but you asked about. Sorry,
but you did a lot of remembering the Bible when I was a chaplain at Silcote School,
well,
Jenny Everingham.
I know I've got my. But you asked about kind of what verse you take with you, and
yes.
for me it was the kind of, is it Corinthians, the many parts one body.
Oh, very good.
And
yeah,
I think that comes back to this, is that although it feels everyone's very diverse, it is that idea of community that comes out at the end, and that's what we need to keep remembering, is that we've got more in common than we do apart.
Yeah, Jenny, I like it. Thank you so much. That's lovely. Yeah, so we're all parts of this one body, however diverse we might be, and there's our part to play in it. Thank you, Jenny. That's a bit of the remembered Bible there. Jenny is a history teacher from the north of England. Now, come now. Someone else has got a suggestion to make about that. You know you have, really. Oh dear, there's all...
I've talked a lot, but can I just ask, because you've said about you deliberately chose Hope as a name.
Yeah.
You also have Joy as a name, and this is a book which is actually quite dark.
Yeah.
It is very dark, and people
all the names
kind of succumbed to this very dark philosophy of, you reach a certain age, you're no longer needed, you're not required, so pop or whatever it is and pop your clogs, basically.
All the names are chosen on purpose from that point of view. Joy is there.
Yeah. So what? What's behind Joy? You've said, obviously Hope, but Joy, because there's not that much joy in the book in some respects. There is, but there isn't, if you see what I mean.
But early on in the book, we hear about Joy, don't we? We know she's there for a purpose. And I'll not give the spoilers away about it, but you're right. Some things are unresolved by the end of the book, which has Jane saying, will there be a sequel? And it's partly that drives me to think there might be. Joy's partner is called Justice. This little family is called Justice, Joy, and Hope, aren't they? And Justice's name came to me before Joy's, to be honest, because for me, that's so crucial, the whole justice aspect of it, the whole need that we must pursue justice. I had various other versions, what is it God requires of us? Well, that we do justice, love mercy, walk humbly. They all come up there for some reasons, but they also, of course, are accompanied by this great swathe of characters from the history of the north of England, who have also followed the way of the crosswise one, and who are led by, that multitude of northern saints. So if you've got a favourite northern saint, you might find them here.
One last thing to add, Janet, which is you read the Beatitudes, and there's a French Jewish author who translates the Beatitudes. He's translated the whole of the New Testament into French, and he translates blessed, which is Makarios, in the Greek. He translates it as en marche in French, which of course means walk on.
Walk on.
And so that sort of, I was just thinking about that as you were reading the Beatitudes. Yes, it fits quite well. It puts it's about walk on, you peacemakers. And he also uses it in the Magnificat. And so Mary says, from henceforth, all generations will call me walk on.
Yeah.
So en marche, all generations will call me not blessed, but en marche.
Yes.
And I think that also gives you a sense of what that means, and that comes much more from the Aramaic. And I've heard a Palestinian archbishop praising that Jewish translation of the Beatitudes. And I had to interpret for him once when he was saying that in French. I just thought that says something about the power of what we're doing with words as well, and what you're doing with words, and linking words and walking. And that's really important.
Thank you, Jane. Words and walking, there's a lot of it in Surplus to Requirements. Well, I think probably we may have reached the end, because it is surely now 8 o'clock. And have we, we've got to tell you what the Longdendale Press is.
I was going to ask you about the old character, which is the landscape.
Oh, yes, the landscape plays a very big part in the book. That's true. But we may not have time to go into that now, because you need to tell them about Longdendale Press. What is Longdendale Press, Bob?
Well, instead of finding publishers, we decided to be one. And the thing's printed on demand. But since we've got the systems working, I thought, now I failed my English O level at first time round. So I don't like doing too many words. So I've done a couple of slim volumes, which I just sent to the people who do the printing, and that will be part of the press as well. I don't know if any of you remember the haikus that I used to tweet when tweet wasn't controlled by a fascist. And well, some of them, and a few other ones as well. Yeah, anyway, well, you can find out about it on the website when it's actually to be had.
What he's trying to say is, coming soon from Longdendale Press, some more volumes, this time haiku-ish sound bites from Bob Warwicker.
Yeah.
So we'll tell you all about that in due course. Okay. Anyway, thanks all of you for coming. We much appreciate it. This recording may be available at some point, who knows. And we'll see you all again soon, we hope. If you want to be in touch about any of these things, just email us. You can find us at bobjanet.org.uk. And it's always great to hear from you. Thanks so much. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Janet and Bob.
Thank you, Janet. Thank you. Good night.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, well done, Janet.
Thank you.
Well,
Bye.
bye.
Movavi. Movavi. Movavi.